Today on The Real Story, we're talking everything from health insurance rates to energy costs as we sit down with Connecticut's Attorney General. His fight to keep prescriptions and home heating affordable, plus a response to a state audit which claims mistakes in his office lost Connecticut millions. But first, the 2023 primary is just weeks away and minds are already on the 2024 presidential race, with the youth vote potentially a deciding factor and nationwide criticisms over age in politics. We're talking to two people who didn't let their age stop them when it comes to local leadership and civic engagement. All this and more coming up on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wulfhorst. We're just weeks away from Connecticut's primary election. Pull out your calendars, polls open on September 12th. But what's on the ballot and why should you care? The primary is leaving voters with several decisions, key races from mayor in three of the largest cities in the whole state to who's on your town council or board of education. So let's go over the important dates to keep in mind. Absentee ballots are already available, so you can get your application in ASAP, but they are due by September 11th. If you need to register to vote or register to a party and you want to do it online, you've got until September 7th. Primary election day is September 12th, as we said, and the general election is September 7th. So we're covering these races, what you need to know as a voter, and the issues that matter to you. So be sure to download our Fox 61 app for all the Real Story content. Local elections are certainly important, but they tend to have the lowest engagement. Joining me now are two young people who are involved in local politics. We have Alan Cavagnaro, who's Commissioner on Planning and Zoning, and Mitchell Marks, running for Board of Education. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course. So, Alan, you've been in office for almost 2 years now as Planning and Zoning Commissioner. So tell me, what made you interested in local politics?
I think what it really started for me was honestly maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was always into like the city planning games and at least understanding the process of land use and zoning. I think it was more of a, I guess that aspect first before even politics. But you know, it was like AP Gov classes and watching the debates when I was in single digits, you know, watching the McCain and Obama debate, then Romney and Obama. And I think when I got into high school and the AP Gov classes that I took, it really instilled the belief in me that, you know, if young people are not at the decision desk making the votes, you know, other people are going to be there doing it for us instead.
Right. And Mitchell, you're running for, you know, in this election for a seat on South Windsor's Board of Ed. So running isn't easy, and nationwide there are fewer new candidates running in races. So what made you want to do this?
I mean, so from when I was little, I was a huge history buff back in elementary school. And eventually I found that I wanted to, you know, create a career in politics rather than focusing solely on history. I saw, you know, I had a lot of involvement in South Windsor. I was, you know, on our robotics team, I was a leader there. I was a leader in Model UN and across the high school. So as I started progressing through, you know, my public school in South Windsor, I wanted to make sure that, you know, I wanted to help the people of South Windsor. So I mean, I started running because, you know, considering I went to public schools in South Windsor for my K through 12 education, you know, I felt that I had a calling for public service. And, you know, as, you know, for this election, I think there's a lot on the ballot, you know, everything from, in my opinion, you know, mental health services in schools to STEM education. So I think, you know, as a candidate and hopefully as a member of the Board of Education, I can continue to support the public school district that gave so much to me over my, you know, career so far. Yeah.
Right, and engagement in local politics is, you know, unfortunately at an all-time low, but of course certain issues at times catch people's attention. Let's talk about why people just aren't following or getting involved in their local government. There's a big job to get people caught up on what's going on. You know, a lot of outreach is needed, but talk to me about what that outreach and trying to get that engagement looks like for you in your communities. Alan, we'll start with you.
That's a really good question. And I laugh because that's one that I've had on my mind for such a long time. Because, again, back in like AP Gov, there's so many people active and engaged and wanting to get involved. And as soon as they graduate high school, it's going off to college and the next chapter of your life. And I don't blame them at all. But the focus has always been trying to engage people in our communities, and so whether that be just simple canvassing like door knocking or phone banking, reaching out to friends, and Mitchell can agree with me on this as well, that we reached out to our friends when we got involved, and all of a sudden we got an uptick in young people getting involved because they saw some familiar faces of why they should actually come out and vote. And I think you just said it right there. If young people don't know anyone on the ballot, then why are they going to come out and vote?
Right. And was that your experience as well?
Yeah, it definitely was. As Alan says, young people sometimes go right to college. I mean, but I'm currently a sophomore at UConn, so I decided I want to, while also being a student, I wanted to make sure that young people had a representative in South Windsor, along with someone like with Alan. And I think for me, I started a social media account a couple weeks ago, and I saw a huge uptake in followers and engagement with local, with young people in the community. People would private message me, or they would call me and they would tell me, we're so happy to see young people on the ballot. And then even family members or friends that I approached about my candidacy, they're like, a lot of them are older, but they still want to see someone with fresh ideas and with a fresh perspective, especially someone that had experience in the public school that they're currently running to benefit and lead, I guess.
Right. So yeah, social media definitely a way to engage people. Maybe our newer age form of traditional door knocking.
Yeah, exactly.
But Alan, when you're meeting with people, working with other elected officials as well, most having some serious years on you, do you find people tend to question your age and experience in your position?
100%, and I'm not the only young person in the entire state of Connecticut that goes through it. It's almost any young person that has a light bulb moment and says, hey, maybe we should get involved. Every person is questioned, and it's unfortunate, It's good to hold, our elected officials accountable and ask them serious questions about policy and how they're qualified. But, fact of the matter is, if you're thinking of running for office and you're thinking of, maybe you're not qualified enough, there's elected officials across the country that were like bartenders before they became Congress members. So, I mean, anyone can do it as long as they have the right drive, a good faith message. So, I mean, not only myself, but I know Mitch as well and others across the state, have been questioned. And, those are good questions to ask, and I don't blame people for asking them. But, fact of the matter is, we're eager young people, we're Gen Zers, we see a lot of problems facing our generation. So at the end of the day, we're in it for the right reasons. We see a lot of problems that are facing our generation, and that's why we're getting involved.
And Mitchell, you mentioned you're a student at the same time as, running for a position. How do you think you can convince the older population here in Connecticut that you need young people in office?
Well, I think, not only, like I said before, we bring fresh ideas, but I also think, we have, especially on a board like the Board of Education, we have that recent experience. I mean, a couple months before, actually a year and a half ago, I was graduating from South Windsor High School, and I was communicating with teachers and other staff and students, and I wanted to make sure that a year later when I'd be running for the Board of Ed, I wanted to make sure that I would be fighting for those people at the schools. And although I might only be 19, I also think that I have that recent experience that's important for anybody, and I think I might, as a candidate, I might have the most recent experience with South Windsor Public Schools.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of conversation recently about career politicians and aging politicians, especially in DC. A lot of serious criticism over many lawmakers' age, including our current president, who is the oldest sitting president in history. So I want to get both of your perspectives on this. Mitchell, we'll start with you. Do you think age limits have a place in politics? And then how do you think you get younger people even interested in running?
Well, I think, age limits are certainly a potential, solution to trying to make sure that young people want to become involved in politics and have a role in either local, state, or national politics. But, so I think age limits I don't want to say specific age, obviously, but,
Sure.
but I think, a way to get young people involved in politics is, have people like Alan and I on the ballot and show that, we are doing this, and we're also happy to have other young people on the ballot. And I think another good way is social media, like you said. I mean, sometimes social media can kind of be seen as like, it can be controversial, but I think in the way that we use it, we try to communicate our views on the issues and how to approach. We try to approach other young people and connect with them rather than just connecting with the whole broad spectrum of voters.
And what about you?
I'm 50-50, and I take it from the approach of, I've interned at the legislature before, and I've seen things go through, and what people sometimes don't understand is that politics is incrementalism. When you're actually going to get change, it's going to maybe be like a 5 to 10 year process. If it's one legislator, pushing this one bill, he's not going to pass it or they're not going to pass it in the first year. It's going to be a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 year at least, approach until you see something. And I would hate to see some people aged out or I guess tenured out of their term before I guess their project or bill gets passed.
Sure.
But on the other hand, there's a lot of people in politics that have been career politicians because of incumbency advantage, which, I'm not necessarily sure I agree should ever exist. But fact of the matter is, if you're a good faith person with great ideas, and there's not many people in your community or area or district that have those ideas, and you feel compelled to keep running, then I don't necessarily see a problem with it. But like you said, it's important to get young people involved, and when we have young leaders and people stepping up to run on other sides of the aisle, that's good for democracy.
Yeah. So many say the young vote could be a deciding factor in upcoming elections, both here in Connecticut and nationwide. But, that's if they show up, whether it's local boards or the presidential ballot. What are the main issues that you each think are igniting young people in politics right now? Alan, we'll start with you.
So I guess on the local level, I guess for me, I'm a bit biased here since I serve on planning and zoning, but affordable housing.
You have a focus on planning and zoning.
Yes, a focus on planning and zoning. For me, a lot of young people are telling me, right after they graduate college, like, oh, I'm not sure I can, stay in Connecticut. And I tell them, why? Connecticut's a great place to live. And unfortunately, they tell me, the cost of living, and I'm not going to just put it down to expensive housing. I'll admit, cost of living in Connecticut is quite high. But for a reason, there's a lot of great things in this state. So of course, the first idea when I'm on planning and zoning, the way I can, impact that is affordable housing. And so those are one of the biggest issues that I'm hearing. But outside of a planning and zoning lens, I'm hearing a lot of social issues, acceptance, of LGBTQ, issues and whatnot, and racial issues as well. But that's key, and I see that on the UConn campus as well. So again, Mitchell may agree with me here, but he could add on to maybe some points I missed.
You have the UConn campus lens as well as an education lens on this. So what are the issues you're seeing on your side?
I think as Alan is focused on planning and zoning, in education, I see issues like diversity and inclusion. Making sure that all races, all genders, everything, they're all represented on a local level, especially since I am running for the local school board. I think making sure that the hiring processes are also are equitable. And then additionally, I'm also seeing issues with mental health. Obviously the COVID pandemic influenced a lot of students' mental health, especially when I was in high school. It was hard to be online, and we want to make sure that those kids are able to receive the mental health resources, and also they're able to catch up after the COVID pandemic. As you said, on the UConn campus, this past year students went up to the Capitol, and we tried to lobby for more funding, in deference to the governor's budget. So I think it's very nice to see students stepping up and advocating for things they're passionate about. And I think that's going to be a good way of progressing into the next election, making sure that young people will not only stay involved, but advocate for the issues they believe in, and communicate to the voters.
Sure. Well, Mitchell, Alan, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but thank you both so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Thank you
so much for having us.
Of course. Well, there's still a lot more to come on The Real Story. We're catching up with Connecticut's Attorney General, what's behind the high energy costs and expensive healthcare, but more importantly, what's the state doing to hold these companies accountable? We're talking all that and more. Stay with us.